الشريف على استشهاد ارجع انس والله انس هاي معك روح انتوا تستنوا انتوا تستنوا المطر محمد محمد يا عماد يا عم تصفيق لا تشوف الله انتوا تستنوا هاي كمان فلان صالح يا ابو سلام انا في الشريف استشهد يا جماعه انا الشهيد انا الشهيد ابعد اشوف ابعد اشوف
Mark my words, what the Zionists have planned next for Gaza is the final solution. They don't want the world to know what's going on, so they are assassinating the journalists. al-Sharif was one of the bravest human beings on this planet. Despite being under threat constantly for almost 2 years, he's been reporting from the most dangerous places in Gaza. And tonight, the Zionists assassinated him. They bombed a journalist tent with him and other journalists. They killed several. They gravely injured many. al-Sharif is now with his Lord. He's in a much better place than where he was for these last 22 months. Now it's up to us to carry on the work that he and the fellow journalists have been doing in Gaza. These brave individuals cannot do this themselves. We must raise our voices louder than ever before, because these Zionists are the worst criminals of our age.
We begin today's show in Gaza, where the Israeli military has admitted assassinating one of the most prominent journalists in Gaza, Al Jazeera correspondent al-Sharif, along with 4 of his colleagues at the network. They were killed in an Israeli airstrike on their media tent outside Al-Shifa hospital. Al Jazeera decried the targeted killing as a, quote, desperate attempt to silence the voices exposing the impending seizure and occupation of Gaza, unquote. Funerals were held today for al-Sharif, his fellow correspondent, Mohammed Kareka, the cameraman, Ibrahim Zahar, and Mohamed Aliwa, and their assistant, Mohammed Nufal. The attack came just weeks after Al Jazeera, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and a top UN official all warned al-Sharif's life was in danger after Israel accused him of being a member of Hamas. At the time, UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Opinion and Expression, Irene Khan, blasted Israel for spreading unfounded accusations about him. Today, she called for sanctions against Israel for the murder of the Al Jazeera team. According to officials in Gaza, Israel's killed 238 journalists over the past 22 months. This is part of an obituary report by Al Jazeera on Anas al-Sharif.
He was one of the most recognizable voices reporting from Gaza since the war began in October 2023, among the few international journalists who remained in northern Gaza throughout the conflict, broadcasting even as Israeli forces ordered more than 1 million Palestinians to evacuate the area. Born in Jabalia refugee camp, al-Sharif graduated from Al-Aqsa University's media faculty. He became one of the key voices from Gaza's front lines. Throughout the war, the 28-year-old reporter paid a high personal price for his commitment to truth. In December 2023, his father was killed when Israeli forces struck the family home in Jabalia. This came weeks after death threats. Israeli officers told him to stop reporting, but he refused. When a ceasefire came into effect in January, relieved Palestinians celebrated as Anas shed his protective gear. The joy was short-lived. Israel broke the ceasefire in March. And in recent weeks, the pressure intensified. The Israeli army targeted him and his colleagues online, falsely accusing al-Sharif of being a Hamas member. Al Jazeera strongly denies those claims. The Committee to Protect Journalists warned his life was in acute danger. They called for international protection, but it never came. Anticipating his murder by Israeli forces, a pre-prepared message was posted on his X account after his death, saying, "If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times. Yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification, so that God may bear witness against those who stayed silent and accepted our killing." He ends, "Do not forget Gaza, and do not forget me in your sincere prayers for forgiveness and acceptance."
Those the words of Anas al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera correspondent, to be released only if he was dead. That obituary report by Al Jazeera. NPR reports this marks the first time since October 2023 that Israel's military so quickly claimed responsibility after it killed a journalist in a strike. In fact, it killed the whole 5-member Al Jazeera team that was camped out under a tent at Al-Shifa Hospital. The attack came hours after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he may allow international journalists into Gaza.
In fact, we have decided, and I've ordered and directed the military to bring in foreign journalists, more foreign journalists, a lot. There's a problem of assuring security, but I think it can be done in a way that is responsible and careful to preserve your own safety. So the directive has been since, when is it? 2 days ago.
To preserve your own safety, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said to the International Press Corps at the news conference. Hours later, Israel assassinated the 5-member Al Jazeera team that had a media tent outside Al-Shifa Hospital and took responsibility for that strike. For more, we're joined in Washington, D.C. by Mohammed Mawad, managing editor of Al Jazeera. Mohammed, our deepest condolences for the death of your Al Jazeera staff in Gaza. Just before we went to air, I watched the Doha offices of Al Jazeera, where scores of journalists and staff and workers gathered, holding up the pictures of not only the 5 men who were killed, and we're talking about 25 and 26-year-olds. Anas al-Sharif is 28 years old, younger than Democracy Now! Not only holding up their pictures, but holding up the pictures of other Al Jazeera staff, journalists, correspondents who have been killed in the West Bank and Gaza. First, your response to Israel assassinating 5 members of your team, 5 more members led by al-Sharif, who'd become famous worldwide to the audience who watches Al Jazeera Arabic for describing what was happening in Gaza.
Thanks, Sammy, for having me, and thanks for the time. It's a devastating loss. Anas and Muhammad were the voices you heard from Gaza's shattered streets, the steady tune that made chaos comprehensible. Muhammad and Anas were the eye behind the lens, catching all the details to the world from Gaza City. They were the only 2 prominent voices left in Gaza. You've heard Prime Minister Netanyahu admitting that no international journalist is allowed to enter Gaza until he directed his team to allow them 2 days ago, subject to security issue. So you have seen that admittance. He said it on his own words. And at the same time, you've seen silencing local journalists. The pattern is clear. Degrading, delegitimizing, smearing, and then killing, justifying the killing by unfounded allegations. You haven't seen presented evidence. You haven't seen any evidence of these allegations, but the world would say that the IDF claimed blah, blah, blah. So that's what we have been seeing from the Israeli government from the start of this war. The fact that they have claimed the assassination of Anas al-Sharif right after carrying the attack means that all other journalists killed by Israel, over 200 journalists killed by the IDF, where no one was held accountable to that. So they felt like the journalistic community around the world and the international community isn't concerned about what's going on, so we can continue the pattern. So Anas and Muhammad's voices aren't silenced. They're the truth that they have been carrying to the world since the beginning of the war would echo in our coverage. We will continue the coverage. We aren't in the business of weaponizing our platform against anyone, but to give voice to the voiceless and to make sure that Gaza's story is told to the world. We are scrambling around right now to find someone who can report it from inside Gaza City. We have seen the announcement from the Israeli government that they are unleashing a new operation in that area. And that came right before targeting and killing Anas al-Sharif and Muhammad Tariqa, the only 2 prominent and left voices there. So the fact that Anas and Muhammad weren't on a front line or in a military zone, not a collateral damage like the IDF used to say, they were in the last fragile refuge left for them, a tent that they fled to after their homes were destroyed by Israeli airstrikes. They were there, they thought that this tent would, they are in a tent, they are safe. The Israeli government wouldn't target a journalist or kill a journalist in his tent or something like that. But no, the assassination attempt was clear. The threats that Anas received days ago and since the beginning of this war was true. They have planned it, and Anas was very resilient. I mean, we have been placing pressure on Anas and his colleagues to stay safe, to stop the coverage. Anas fainted at one moment on air while reporting because of starvation, and he did not stop the coverage. Sometimes he struggled to feed his family. He did not back down. He did not stop the coverage. He continued the coverage. He used to say to us, Gaza's story is my story. I'm not getting out of here. This is my people. At a certain time, Anas al-Sharif criticized the whole situation of the international journalistic community. And call for the journalistic community to stand strong to prevent any harm for him. But it seems like what's happening right now is beyond the imagination, Emily.
Let me ask you, a sixth journalist, Mohammed al-Khaldi, who worked as a freelance reporter, was also killed in the strike that targeted your team, the 5 members of the Al Jazeera team. That's according to the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, right? That tent was right up against the hospital in the courtyard. That's according to Al-Shifa Hospital director, Dr. Mohammed Abul Samia. Do you know anything about him?
Of course, those are photographers who were working with Anas and Muhammad Tariqa and bringing all the images from inside Gaza City. You know, the number of journalists are very limited in Gaza City, reporting from there after targeting so many journalists in that area. This is a frontline area. The whole area is a frontline itself.
Also, just looking at Agence France Presse's description of the funeral today, their bodies wrapped in white shrouds with their faces exposed were carried through the narrow alleys to their graves by mourners, including men wearing blue journalist flak jackets. His father, Anas al-Sharif's father, was killed December of 2023 when an airstrike targeted their home in Jabalia, where Anas himself grew up. I wanted to ask you, Mohammed, as we just said, I watched that ceremony in your headquarters in Doha where people stood in the offices and also were beamed in, like Irene Khan, the special rapporteur on freedom of expression. She called for Israel to be sanctioned for the killing of these journalists, and also talked about, and we saw it in the report, Jody Ginsburg, the head of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Irene Khan, Al Jazeera itself, understood how targeted Anas was when he was getting warnings by Israeli officials to stop reporting. What are you calling for now?
We have been calling since the beginning of the war, the international journalistic community to stand strong and take actions. I mean, I think not enough action is being taken by news outlets around the globe. We have seen more pressure being placed on governments and authoritarian regimes back then during the Arab Spring to allow journalists to cover what's happening in Gaza. The fact that no international journalist is allowed to enter Gaza means that you can easily delegitimize any local coverage, as the Israeli government used to do. But if you have an international journalist who is reporting and bringing in eyewitness account of what's happening, that would somehow guarantee the safety of other journalists locally in Gaza. What we are seeing now, Amy, is something is dying in Gaza beyond the bodies. The journalism profession itself is dying. I mean, this profession is meant to eliminate the world and is being buried with its witnesses. 200 journalists in Gaza were killed by Israeli airstrikes. The space they're this occupying much of the global media disproportionately small. Sometimes in modern history, news cycles would stop because there is a killing of a journalist. That's not the case right now. Something darker happening right now. They're not targeting a journalist by starvation or bullet or airstrike. What we are seeing now is silencing the coverage, the whole coverage. They went after Al Jazeera because we are the only international organization covering the conflict from the front line. They went after us in Jerusalem, shutting down our office, went after us in West Bank, shutting down our office, went after our colleagues, killed our colleagues, reporting, bringing an eyewitness account from the ground. So it's really alarming for the whole international journalistic community. The profession is under siege in Gaza. The profession is under attack. The fact that you're not able to report on what's going on means that in coming days, when dictatorship commits crimes and no one is talking about, he will be immune of any international pressure placed on him.
Mohammed Mawad, I want to thank you for being with us, managing editor of Al Jazeera. We're speaking to him in Washington, D.C. And again, from all of us at Democracy Now!, our deepest condolences on the death of your 5-member team right outside Al Jazeera Hospital. It is not only Al-Shifa Hospital, it is a loss not only, of course, though, to Al Jazeera, but to all of us as journalists, to the whole community around the world. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
Israel just murdered al-Sharif. Al-Sharif, who has been reporting every single day since the start of the genocide for nearly 2 years, despite the countless threats that the occupation threatened him with, despite the fact that they killed his father and his friends and his family, he continued to report despite the fact that he was hungry. The occupation has continued to threaten him, and one of the last times he reported, he was talking about the starvation in Gaza when a woman collapsed right in front of him and he broke down on the screen crying because he was hungry, because everyone around him is hungry, because he's seeing people collapse and faint in the street because they're hungry. Because Israel is starving them while they are bombarding them, while they are depriving them of every basic human right and necessity, and Anas was telling the world, and they killed him. Israel continues to get away with murdering journalists after journalists and doing as they please, and no one is able to stop them. They continue to get away with whatever they want. No one holds them accountable for the 2 freaking years of genocide and the forced starvation and the countless displacement and the loss of everything in Gaza.
This is al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera reporter who became known as the voice of Gaza.
al-Sharif Al Jazeera.
He was killed by Israel late on Sunday night, alongside fellow Al Jazeera reporter Mohammed Qreqa and their cameramen Mu'min Alewa, Mohammed Norfal and Ibrahim Zahir. Israel killed these journalists in a direct airstrike on a tent they worked from in Gaza City, which was clearly marked and known to be for journalists. Directing attacks against journalists is a violation of international humanitarian law and also constitutes a war crime. Tributes poured in immediately for these journalists who were admired across the globe. 28-year-old Anas al-Sharif from the Jabalia refugee camp in North Gaza became one of the most prominent reporters in the Gaza Strip. He bravely reported non-stop on what Palestinians in Gaza had been forced to endure under Israel's suffocating blockade, genocidal war, and systematic starvation. Anas and his colleagues in North Gaza were at times the only reporters able to relay what the Israeli army was doing to the Jabalia refugee camp and surrounding areas. Destroying entire Palestinian neighborhoods and emptying the camps of their residents. At times, these scenes they reported on in the aftermath of Israeli attacks left them in shock and speechless. But despite this, they vowed to continue their coverage. Over the course of the war, they witnessed and reported on their family members, friends, and colleagues being targeted and killed by Israeli forces. Anas had to report on his father's killing as he received the news live on air, after Israel directly struck his family home. His 65-year-old father was an old sheikh in the Jabalia refugee camp, and Israel killed him after threatening Anas's life if he did not stop reporting. Anas also mourned the killing of his colleague and close friend, 27-year-old Ismail al-Ghul, after Ismail was targeted by an Israeli airstrike on a car clearly marked as press. Mohammed Qreqa was a calm and eloquent reporter who powered on through the Israeli attacks and crimes he reported on.
لكل شخص في غزة قصة طويلة من ألم الفقد والحرمان والوجع.
He called on the world outside the Gaza Strip to be moved enough by what they see to stop Israel in its tracks and bring an end to this war. Mohammed Qreiqa's mother was killed during Israel's siege and destruction of the al-Sharif medical complex in March 2024. Mohammed spent days searching for his mother, but was only able to identify and retrieve her body after the Israeli army withdrew from the hospital they had destroyed.
ولقيت أمي نايمة، عرفتها أنا من نومتها بس، عرفتها من نومتها، عرفتها من أظافرها، عرفتها من الأواعي، عرفتها من شعرها كمان. أنا وحيد أمي طول الفترة هذه اللي عايشينها أنا بس عايش معها، لقيت أمي نزبتني وأنا ضليت لحالي.
Both al-Sharif and Mohammed Qreiqa were fathers of young children from whom they had been separated for most of the past 2 years of the war. Anas now leaves behind his young daughter Sham and his son Salah.
بابا ترامب بقول بده يطلعنا من غزة، أنت بدك تطلع من غزة؟
لا طبعا في غزة.
And Muhammad leaves behind his son Zain and young daughter. Israel has been threatening and inciting against these journalists for over a year, accusing young journalists like al-Sharif of having ties to Hamas without producing any evidence to back their claims. Israel had accused 23-year-old reporter Hussam Shabat of also being linked to Hamas before they killed him in a direct airstrike in March 2025. Israel has killed at least 269 journalists since October 2023. In July, al-Sharif told the Committee to Protect Journalists that he lived with the feeling that he could be bombed or martyred at any moment. The Al Jazeera network condemned in the strongest terms the targeted assassination of its correspondents al-Sharif and Mohammed Qreiqa. In a statement, the Israeli army openly admitted to targeting the journalists and said they were hit by an assault directed towards the tent they were stationed in opposite the Al-Shifa medical complex in Gaza. Al Jazeera reported that the order to assassinate al-Sharif, one of Gaza's most prominent journalists, and his colleagues is a desperate attempt to silence the voices exposing the impending seizure and occupation of Gaza, holding the Israeli forces and government responsible for deliberately targeting and assassinating its journalists. al-Sharif's will was posted shortly after he was killed, and part of it reads, "If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. First, peace be upon you and Allah's mercy and blessings. Allah knows I gave every effort and all my strength to be a support and a voice for my people, ever since I opened my eyes to life in the alleys and streets of the Jabalia refugee camp. I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification. Allah may bear witness against those who stayed silent, those who accepted our killing, those who choked our breath, and whose hearts were unmoved by the scattered remains of our children and women, doing nothing to stop the massacres that our people have faced for more than a year and a half." Though Anas's career was cut short, those he left behind vowed to continue his message.
أنس الشريف الجزيرة غزة فلسطين.
So as you all know, they don't allow in foreign journalists into Gaza. Israel bans that because they know it'll make them look bad if people go in there and tell the truth. But we do have a bunch of Palestinian journalists who are there, who are telling their stories. And so one of these guys is a guy by the name of Anas al-Sharif. He's been documenting the entire genocide from the very beginning. He's an Al Jazeera journalist. He's done some super important work. And guess what? It turns out Israel just did a targeted assassination on him the other day, a massive terror attack where they not only killed him, they killed him and 6 other journalists at the same time. That's what just happened. So here, let me show you. The genocidal occupation has assassinated Anas al-Sharif, the most prominent journalist in Gaza, with a targeted airstrike. He posted 45 minutes ago and now he's dead. Kinetic strike, most likely keyed off his cell phone signal, which the IDF tracks. To the journalists in the West who toe the line with the New York Times editorial board, any words for your colleague? Well, they sure do have words for them, because Israel immediately came out and smeared him as a Hamas terrorist, and you had a lot of Western outlets run with that, where they would both sides it. They'd say, oh, well, you know, a lot of people say he was a journalist and he was doing important work, and others say he was a Hamas terrorist. So it would go out there and both sides it, and they have no interest in the actual truth. No interest in the fact that that's complete and utter horseshit. he had said the following: important, please share and tag all press freedom and human rights organizations. Once again, the Israeli army spokesperson has launched a campaign of threats and incitement against me because of my work as a journalist with Al Jazeera. I reaffirm, I, Anas al-Sharif, am a journalist with no political affiliations. My only mission is to report the truth from the ground as it is, without bias. So the reason he was posting stuff like that is because he knew that the IDF had it out for him, and there was effectively a target on his back. He was aware of that. This is him begging, this is him pleading for international solidarity and support. That's what this is. Well, guess what? They continue to lie about him. So all of the pro-Israel Zionist hacks on social media, they started spreading around fake news, pictures of him with Hamas leaders, which they say proves that he's a Hamas member. Kind of ironic, because one of the people who was sending this picture was that Eyal Yacobi, who I call Yak Boy, and he has pictures with fucking Netanyahu. So by your own standard, should it be legal to murder you, since you're hanging out with modern-day Adolf Hitler? What are you talking about? He's a journalist. Yes, he talked to Hamas people. Doesn't mean he was in Hamas. Okay, but they're spreading this. This is completely and utterly made up, by the way. This is supposedly a Telegram message on October 7th, and it says, 9 hours and the heroes are still roaming the country, killing and capturing. God, God, how great are you? With hearts. Okay. The message is completely fake, and Mohammed Shahada points this out. Just went through all of Anas al-Sharif's messages on October 7, 2023. No such message exists. Telegram doesn't even put the date on the messages. Israel is so desperate to justify murdering Gaza's top journalist, but all they have are doctored documents, fake screenshots, and a picture he took as a journalist with Gaza's rulers. Absolutely incredible. Now, this is going to get a lot sadder, because here we have a video of Anas al-Sharif from earlier this year, the Al Jazeera journalist, reuniting with his young daughter during a Muslim holiday. Here, watch this.
Marwan's decree was speed. The future must be met.
Is a guy, Israel murdered this guy. Think about what that poor little girl has to go through. Assuming, of course, she's still alive. Assuming she's still alive. All right, so Mohammed Shahada, he went on Al Jazeera after the terror attack against Anas al-Sharif, and it's actually 6 total Al Jazeera journalists. They took out the whole crew. The whole crew that was on the ground doing their job, reporting the facts. They're dangerous. And by the way, I should point this out too. The reason they did it now is because Israel, as you all know, is going to invade Gaza City. They're going to take over they're going to occupy the entire strip and resettle the entire strip. And this is phase 1 of that. And they're going to go into Gaza City and basically kill anything that remains. Kill anybody that remains. And so they knew Anas al-Sharif was not going to leave. They knew he was going to document anything and everything that they're doing in Gaza City. So in order to hide their atrocities, they said murder him up front. That's why they did it. All right, but here's Mohammed Shahada talking about this, reminding everybody the track record of the Israelis and all of the claims that they've made since the beginning of this genocide. And this really shows you how deplorable and low and disgusting and pathetic and fake the charge is that Anas al-Sharif was in Hamas. Here we go.
One thing that you need to keep in mind is Israel has been lying incessantly since the beginning of the genocide. It's been the cornerstone of Israel's genocidal campaign to lie every single day about everything possible and to come up with the most lunatic lies possible, imaginable. Israel lied about massacring the ambulance workers in Rafah. They lied about the GHF massacres. They lied about the Shifa Hospital, the Flower Massacre, the beheaded babies, Hamad Hospital, Hind Rajab, the terror list at the Rantisi Hospital that turned out to be a calendar, the World Central Kitchen workers, babies in ovens, white phosphorus, deliberately starving Gazans, Sinwar surrounding himself with 20 hostages in a tunnel, gassing hostages, the Ahli Hospital, killing women and children with white flags, mass raping Palestinians, non-existent tunnels under graveyards, Nasser Hospital, Hussam Abu Safiya, mass graves, snipers targeting kids in the hits, providing protection to criminal gangs that are looting aid systematically. Israel also lied about wiping out Gaza incrementally, gradually. They lied about refusing and collapsing the ceasefire, blowing up Gazans fleeing now south, blowing up and destroying Kamal Udwan Hospital, claiming that dead Gazan children are fake plastic dolls, creating alleged safe zones that they push the people into, and they bomb them once they get there. They lied about the general's plan. They lied about how many Hamas militants they killed, about the Red Crescent taking part in October 7th. That was another lie. They lied about how many journalists they've killed, and they lied about designating previous journalists as Hamas militants. They lied about Muhammad Abu Silmiya, the head of the Shifa hospital. They lied about the Indonesian hospital, about UNRWA, Al-Auda hospital, killing women sheltering at a church, bombing the church again, bombing another church, destroying every single university in Gaza, destroying the overwhelming majority of schools in Gaza, blowing up Gaza's Turkish cancer hospital, the sole cancer hospital in Gaza. They lied about Hamas hiding giant stockpiles of fuel in Rafah and Hamas looting aid. They lied about finding active smuggling tunnels in Rafah. They lied about hostages that would return pregnant. And they lied about who killed Yussi Sharabi, Itai Sivrisky, and other hostages as well that the IDF themselves killed. And after all these lies, Israel comes up and says, but trust us, our next lie will be 100% true. Trust us. You should attach as much value to Israel's allegations about Anas al-Sharif as you attach to the dust on the floor. Because without lies at this stage, without lies, Israel's narrative dies completely. It's the only way they can sustain the genocide.
So they've murdered over 200 journalists, which is more than any conflict in history. And what they're doing is targeting journalists because journalists tell the story of the Palestinians. And they don't want that. They don't want the story to get out. It makes them look bad. It makes them look really bad. So after Anas got killed, an Al Jazeera reporter was on air and he burst into tears.
وفي مداخلة سابقة نهاية شهر يوليو الماضي وفي ذكرى مرور عام على استشهاد الزميل إسماعيل الغول تحدث الزميل أنس الشريف عن التهديدات التي يتعرض لها من قوات الاحتلال خلال تغطيته للحرب على قطاع غزة.
The fact that the world has let this go on as long as it has, it really makes you lose faith in humanity. I mean, it really does. If we're being blunt about it, if we're being straightforward about it, I mean, how can people sit here and watch this happen and just act like it's nothing, right? People are supposed to go about living their normal lives, going about their normal days, knowing that now these are the rules of the road. And nobody's safe. Nobody's safe anymore. The Geneva Convention, the Nuremberg Tribunals, right? International law, the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice. Now you look at that and you go, oh, that is completely and utterly fake. And it's optional. And it's law of the jungle. Really, it's might makes right. Really, it's the more powerful you are, you can get away with whatever the fuck you want to get away with. And that means none of us are safe. None of us are safe. That's what that means. Because if you let this happen, there's nothing you won't let happen, right? I mean, that's actually what it comes down to. Now, I also want to give you an update on the starving. Here's some statistics on it. 13 days of trucks entering the Gaza Strip since the Israeli occupation announced it would allow aid in starting Sunday, the 27th of July. Okay, so Israel said under pressure, international pressure, on July 27th, they go, it's okay, we're going to start allowing in more trucks. Ready? So on July 27th, they allowed in 73 trucks. 28th, 87 trucks. The 29th, 109 trucks. The 30th, 112 trucks. And then we go on here. The highest you get is 112 trucks on July 30th. And then the lowest you get is, I believe, 36 trucks on August 2nd. But as you can see, the number is around 80, 90, 95 trucks that they allow in per day. Okay, you ready for this? The total number of trucks that entered Gaza reached only 1,115 out of the 7,800 trucks required. So in other words, just 14% of the actual needs of Gaza. The majority of those trucks were looted or seized amid a manufactured state of chaos deliberately engineered by the Israeli occupation as part of a systemic policy of starvation and chaos engineering aimed at breaking the will of the Palestinian people and undermining their resilience. So what he's referring to here is what we reported on. I forget who originally reported it. It may have been Haaretz. I think it was Haaretz. But there was a big article where they explained how the IDF is working with effectively jihadist gangs, and they are paying these jihadist gangs to steal the aid. And then when these gangs steal the aid, Israel turns around and says, Hamas stole the aid. But really, it's Israel paying these jihadist gangs to steal the aid. That's what's been happening. And so as a direct result of that, here are the pictures. I'm going to warn you, this is hard to look at, but you need to see these because this is what's actually happening with our tax money in our name, because here in the U.S., we arm and fund Israel and support them no matter what they do. And here's the direct result of those policy actions. Look, these are all completely real. pictures of starving people, babies, seniors. This is what it looks like. This is what this policy looks like in action. And again, the world sat back and let it happen. This one's tough to watch too. I'm going to warn you from Dropsite News. We actually have video. You know how they've been doing some airdrop of aids? Well, of aid, I should say. Well, the airdrops are, it's PR. It's marketing. It's bullshit. Because you can only get in a tiny fraction of the amount of aid that's needed through airdrops. So this is all just like, this is all marketing. This is all managing optics, right? And so these things are also very dangerous, right? And we actually ended up getting video. Again, I'll warn you, skip ahead like 30 seconds or so if you, don't want to see this. But here we have somebody who actually got crushed by falling aid to the ground. So people try to position themselves to get to the aid because they're starving and they desperately need it. And sometimes you position yourself a little too well and the aid lands on top of you and crushes you and kills you, which is exactly what happened in this instance. So we also have this. Auda Hathaleen worked on the Oscar-winning film No Other Land, okay? And he actually filmed himself getting killed by an Israeli settler. I believe this was released by the Israeli human rights group, Bet Salem. I believe they got their hands on this video and released it. But the guy recording this video is literally an Oscar-winning filmmaker who was involved in No Other Land, the story about the West Bank. And he literally filmed his death. So again, I'll warn you in advance, this is about 25 seconds. Skip ahead if you don't want to see this, but this is ugly. So he literally filmed his own death. This is the guy right here. Guy in the gray shirt in the distance. That's the settler who ends up killing him. Watch again. There you go. And by the way, this is totally commonplace in the West Bank. In the West Bank, they are putting the clamps down. They are taking over the entire West Bank. So it's not only that Israel's taking over all of Gaza, resettling all of Gaza, they're going to take over all the West Bank. They're going to ethnically cleanse that as well. They're also stealing large swaths of Syria. They feel invincible right now because there's been no consequences for their actions, and they're trying to create the greater Israel. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're working on. And so what you're seeing here, this is not like a special day in the West Bank. In the West Bank, the IDF and the illegal settlers regularly terrorize the Palestinians who live there. Regularly. And there's a guy filming his own murder. Just horrible, terrible, horrific updates here for you. And again, I think the most soul-sucking part of this is at no point does the true narrative break through, right? The true narrative being exactly what it looks like. That Anas al-Sharif was a journalist doing his job, bravely covering the horrific atrocities against the Palestinian people. And instead of that being how the media in the West discusses it, what they do is they both sides it. And so as long as the IDF is out there saying, oh, he was a Hamas terrorist, then there's always a line in every article saying, oh, he's alleged to have been a Hamas terrorist. And that's enough to make a lot of people sort of, brush it off and act like, oh, okay, well, there's a question about that, so, what are you going to do? But it's a lie, and it's a smear. And it's a way to try to make you look away from the regular atrocities and war crimes and genocidal actions that are occurring on a daily basis in Gaza, now in the West Bank too. And it's just sad day for humanity. Like I said, I know I'm not the only one, but it's very easy to lose hope in humanity watching the reaction to what's been going on when this should be on the forefront of everybody's mind. And everybody should be fighting to change this. I'll end on this point. I think the Irish president is right when he came out and said it's time for multilateral military action against Israel to force them to stop the genocide, to allow in all of the aid, allow in all of the medicine. I think the international community should keep Israel in check. And if the international community needs to use military force to get Israel to stop being the genocidal maniac that it is, well, then that's what we should do. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
Well, let's talk now to Professor of International Law at Middlesex University in London, William Shahbaz. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Let's talk first then about Anas al-Sharif. Under international law, what justification can there be for deliberately, as Israel's admitted to doing, targeting him in an airstrike?
Well, if somebody is a combatant who is directly participating in hostilities, then you can target them. He obviously wasn't directly participating in hostilities, and I think that's probably enough to eliminate this altogether from the possibility that he would be a legitimate target. The other thing that I would say about it is that Israel has regularly murdered journalists in Gaza, in the West Bank, and they lie about it. So the account that they've given is not, I think we have to wait for the dust to settle before we give credence to the explanation that Israel has even provided.
Yeah, so as far as you can tell at this stage, any explanations, either from the Israeli government or from the IDF, effectively mean nothing, even if they have evidence that he is, as they put it, a Hamas operative.
Well, as I said, killing an armed conflict requires that the individual be directly participating in the hostilities, and that's clearly not what's going on here. So I think that that's out of the question anyway. But as I say, Israel has a pattern of murdering journalists and then lying about it, giving pretexts, giving explanations that later prove to be invalid. So I don't attach any significance to the explanation that they've given.
As you mentioned, string of incidents, but at the end of the day, at least in the short term, nothing actually happens, does it? There's no comeback, if you like.
Well, because Israel treats itself as being above the law. They have virtually no prosecutions within their own domestic legal system for war crimes, although there's so much evidence of these taking place in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and the occupied territory. And so, yeah, they're being held accountable, but by international institutions and to some extent by national courts who are prosecuting them. I think that recently some people were arrested in Belgium. Some former Israel Defense Force soldiers have been arrested there. But it's a difficult one, and Israel treats itself as being above the law and immune from any accountability, really.
And talking realistically, is there any way at this stage of speeding that up or ensuring that there is some kind of accountability in the short term rather than just potentially in the longer term?
Well, yes, there is, but it would require a considerable amount of political will by the powerful Western countries that are pretty loyal still to Israel. Now, that loyalty is starting to splinter a little bit. The calls in many countries, including the United Kingdom, Canada, and so on, to recognize Palestine. That hasn't happened yet, but the pledges are pretty determined, and I think that it's quite likely that's going to happen. But this is not going to be enough pressure on Israel. What really has to get at Israel is both depriving Israel of military assistance, of the arms that it needs to do pretty much everything that it does right now. It's absolutely dependent on the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and so on for its military activity.
Let's talk as well about the Gaza plan. Benjamin Netanyahu saying on Friday that Israel intends to take control. Those are the words he used of Gaza City. It's still very unclear exactly what he means, isn't it? But is there any justification for that under international law?
No, there's not. And we've seen that this has been, in fact, a pattern since the conflict began in October of 2023 of constantly displacing the population within this tiny territory. And what they're going to do now is, in effect, to kettle most of the population in Gaza in a small part of this territory, which is tiny to begin with, and then we'll see what they do with the northern part of Gaza, which they intend to control. They've also indicated that they intend to repurpose that to bring settlers to northern Gaza and perhaps elsewhere. All of this, I think, is further evidence. This is going to be part of the evidence that will make the case for genocide at the International Court of Justice in the case that's been filed by South Africa.
And presumably, going back to the answers you were giving earlier on, if Israel does go ahead with this plan, and depending what kind of stage or sequence it's at, but is there anything that could be done to actually stop them?
Well, we could have a Security Council resolution, but that is going to meet with the veto of the United States of America. When you say, what could we do to stop them? Many countries could take measures that will slow them down. None of them, other than the United States, is really in a position to stop them. If the United States said stop, it would finish within 24 hours. But other countries are providing assistance, military, economic, and political, diplomatic assistance, and they need to take measures. They can all do, even if they're doing a little bit, they can all do a great deal more. And promising to recognize Palestine is a good step, but there are many more things that could be done, and that can be done without the opposition, even with the loyalty of the United States under Donald Trump to the regime in Israel.
William Shahbaz, good to talk to you on the programme today. Thank you very much, from Professor of International Law at Middlesex University in London.
Al Jazeera employees are holding a moment of silence to mourn the murder of Anas al-Sharif and 4 of our colleagues in a deliberate Israeli attack on a tent that they were in. We'll take you straight to the Al Jazeera Arabic newsroom here in Doha to listen in.
In Gaza, who wonders in the different tents, and also the people who are starving, and also the hospitals and the beds in those destroyed hospitals. Those are photos who needed to disappear according to the murderers. Those are photos and pictures and footage that changed the opinion of the international community, given the tragedy that the Palestinian cause in Palestine is known, and it showed the world who are the children murderers and the racists in this part of the world. That's why Anas was told, as well as to Dahduh as well, you have to stop, otherwise. But he was determined, together with Mohammed Kreka and all the other correspondents and team of Al Jazeera, in their mission to reveal the truth, knowing that this otherwise was a clear threat to their life that will be executed at any time. This is how Anas and Muhammad and Ibrahim and Muhammad, they are now with Ram al-Rifi wal-Ghul wa Muhammad al-Dahduh, Samir Abu Daqqa, Ahmad al-Luh and Shireen Abu Aqla. They are all in the same place. They left us. We are here today standing in order to express our gratitude and also to remain faithful to our colleagues and martyrs, and to say that we are determined to remain professionals and to continue on this path. Now we give the floor to Asim Al-Hamidi, the news editor. May all the martyrs rest in peace. May all the martyrs of Al Jazeera rest in peace, as well as those who are trying to reveal the truth. This is a tragedy. However, it is a tragedy that will open the door to determination and to continue to move forward on the path of showing the truth. We say the killing of prophets did not stop the message from being conveyed. And we say also that killing correspondents and journalists will not prevent the spreading of the truth, the facts, and the words. May Anas al-Sharif rest in peace. May Muhammad al-Qriqa rest in peace. May Ibrahim al-Dahir rest in peace. May Muhammad Nufal rest in peace. And may all the martyrs of the truth rest in peace. Thank you. Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Asif. Now we have Mu'min al-Sharafi from Gaza, from the tent, precisely the tent where Israel killed our colleagues. Mu'min, we express our sincere condolences to you and to all our colleagues in Palestine. The words, we have no words to express our condolences when it comes to Anas, Muhammad Kreka, Anas and Muhammad and Ibrahim and all the other colleagues. You have the floor. In fact, sorrow and sadness is beyond words here in Gaza. All the words in all the languages of the world cannot express the missing and the tragedy following the martyrdom of Mohammed Qariqa, Anas al-Sharif, Ibrahim Dafir, and Nofel and Mu'min Alewa and our colleague Mohammed Al-Khaldi. Those heroes have documented for over the last 2 years all the crimes of the Israeli occupation in northern Gaza. They documented with voice and image, and they conveyed it to the whole world, hoping that they will move a finger in order to put an end to this genocide, to this killing and murdering that is targeting civilians, doctors and journalists across the strip. We are here standing in front of the tent where our colleagues were martyred, where they spent their last hours before they were killed by a missile from the Israeli army, and they all were killed after that. We are now saying goodbye and bidding farewell to our colleagues who exposed the occupation and the Israeli occupation forces, and to convey this image to the world, who did not try to change a thing. And we say that despite the threatening, we continue our mission, and we express our sincere condolences to all the martyrs, and we are determined to continue to convey the truth until the last breath. We renew also our promise to Anas and to all our colleagues that we will stay committed and we will not stop until all the voices of those who are starved and those who died, those who are suffering from this war, to transmit this to the images to a world who left us alone in front of this genocide. May Anas, Muhammad, Ibrahim and all the martyrs rest in peace, and may God shower us with mercy and also bless their relatives and beloved ones with patience. And we only say what we can, which is, may God be sufficient to us. We express our sincere condolences to you, to their families, and to ourselves as their colleagues and their colleagues everywhere here in Al Jazeera. Thank you. And may God protect you and protect all our beloved colleagues in occupied Palestine. Now with Wael Al-Dahdouh, the director of Al Jazeera office in Gaza, you have the floor. May our colleagues rest in peace. Those who are parts of our own bodies, they are also parts of our souls. However, it is a tragedy and it's heartbreaking to always get together in those sorrow and sadness, as if we are meant to always repeat the sadness and the sorrows one after the other, and tragedies one after the other. In fact, maybe this situation and this tragedy will put us as journalists and colleagues in front of several challenges, big challenges. However, what is important in this context and this regard is that the voice is still coming from the Gaza Strip, despite all those tragedies and despite the sadness. The image is still flowing out of Gaza, and despite all this sorrow that is destroying our hearts and breaking our hearts in the Gaza Strip, given all what they have seen and all the price that they had to pay, expensive price, including with their souls, their blood, and their fear. The colleagues, but also their families, their friends, the neighbors. And despite all this, they are still there, and they are still working as journalists and keeping this mission and determined to convey their message. I think and I believe if there is one condolence, this is our condolences that we should express to the journalism that is being exercised and practiced in Gaza with the values and ethics, this new ethics, if I may say, that is still spreading in Gaza, from Gaza and within Gaza. And However, this timing and this specific opportunity, as we see blood and martyrs, there is one word that should be conveyed to our colleagues across the globe, including the Arab colleagues, the Muslims in Europe and in the United States. Where are you from all this, from all these tragedies and all these violations? We are one journalistic body, that we are all committed and bound by one message. Therefore, we are all responsible and we have a role in this message. It is high time that you take concrete steps, serious steps, all from their own organism and from their own countries and place. And I think that if you play this role fully, maybe we would have been able to put an end to this bloodshedding. I hope that this tragedy, that this big loss and this blood that is being shed should be the last blood to be shed. However, if we as journalists, we are not acting as one body, then this reality will not change and it will not be guaranteed. Thank you, Abu Hamza. Thank you, Wa'il Dahtouh. Now we give the floor to Tamer Al-Mishal, our colleague from Al Jazeera channel. Salma, and to everyone, this is a very difficult moment to be here and to bid farewell to Anas al-Sharif, Mohammed Qariqa, Mohammed Nawfal, Mu'min Alewa, and Muhammad al-Khaldi. To each one of those, they have a story. Anas al-Sharif that you are seeing here, I used to speak to his elder brother. Anas is the youngest in his family. His brother told me, before the war, Anas was the last of our family, which means the youngest one. However, in this war, he became our eldest brother with his mission, with his words, and the way he was performing his role. Mohammed Qariqa, our correspondent, our martyr, he's also the unique child of his parents. He lived orphan as he lost his father, and in this war, he saw the execution of his mother in a hospital in Gaza as she was killed in the second invasion. And now he is a martyr as well in Al-Shifa hospital together with his colleagues. Mohammed Nawfal, their colleague and their companion, he lost before 40 days his mother as well. So we are talking to each colleague who has a story and has a message. Behind the camera, they are suffering, and in front of the camera, they act as heroes. They conveyed the message in the most professional way, and this is the promise that we have to keep here in Al Jazeera in the presence of Wa'il al-Dahtouh, and our hero who is the companion and the friend of Mohammed Nawfal and other correspondents, Muhammad Omar, in presence of those heroes, and after the words pronounced by Al-Aziz Mu'min al-Ishrafi, who lost 22 members of his family as martyrs, we say to everyone in front of this camera and to our colleagues is we promise you to keep conveying our message. We are all here to say that the will of Muhammad and all those who martyred, we will continue to convey our message in the most professional way, in the most responsible way. The Israeli occupation will not be able to kill the image, to kill the truth and the professionalism. The truth will always prevail sooner or later. Thank you, Tamer. We have also Irene Khan with us, the UN envoy for freedom of expression. You have the floor.
بداية أريد أن أشكركم جميعا لتذكركم لي وتحت الفرصة لي للمشاركة برغم هذه الأوقات الحزينة، لكنها لحظة فخر لأن باستطاعتنا أن نفخر بما قام به أنس ورفاقه وما قام به صحفيو الجزيرة في أنحاء العالم من أجل إخراج الحقيقة للجميع. أرغب أن أخبركم أن اليوم قمت بإصدار بيان صحفي
issued a press statement or a press release in which I voiced my anger and also the audacity of the Israeli occupation since the beginning of this, the defamation campaign against Anas, and that was with one purpose, which is to destroy his credibility and then to target him together with his colleagues and also to close the eye of the world that was present in Gaza. However, I do not think that they will be held accountable one day. This is not a coincidence that 4 correspondents or journalists were killed just a few days after Netanyahu declared that he will take over or take control of Gaza. This happened because in order to stop conveying the truth and also to hide all the crimes that are being committed by Israel and the Israeli government. However, this truth will continue to be shown. And I have demanded an investigation, an independent investigation. In fact, we do not believe what is being said by the Israeli army. They say that Anas was a member of Hamas. However, they did not provide any proof to these claims. Same applies to other journalists who were targeted also. The Israeli army is a murderer and they are starving women and children. They do not have any credibility. Therefore, it is important to have an independent investigations that needs to be conducted, and Israel should let the international media to enter Gaza. In fact, the journalists of Gaza have paid a very expensive price, and they will continue to do so. Same as Anas, they will continue to speak and to share the truth. However, if Israel will judge that they have no credibility, then why don't they open the door to international journalists? And if it refuses for the second time to conduct an independent investigation or refused international media to enter the Gaza Strip, then this will be once again a proof the Israeli practices when it comes to crime wars and crimes against humanity. The impunity and also the way the Israeli army is behaving is because they know that they can do whatever they want without any consequences. However, in this regard, I want to say here, because you journalists believe that the truth will never be silenced and that the justice will be served one day. This could take some time, but justice will be served. In the press statement, I also called on all the friends of Israel to impose sanctions on Israel. I think that this is the only way in order to stop the killings, the starvation, and also to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. I think the work that is being carried out by the journalists cannot be expressed in words. After the press release, Anas sent me a message or a letter, and he thanked me a few weeks ago. He thanked me and he told me that he was completely committed to continuing to work in conveying the truth of what is happening in Gaza, to convey this truth to the world. And this is exactly what he did until the very last moments. That was his mission. Journalism is not terrorism. Journalism is one of the most noble professions that exist today, and the world, we all, it helps us to know the truth. Therefore, you are providing a huge service, and those who work in dangerous zones, those who are risking their lives, just like Anas and his colleagues, we tell you that the world will not forget you. We will always remember the work of the journalists. journalists, and I believe that people in Gaza, one day they will have the justice they deserve, and this will be thanks to the work that is being carried out by the journalists today. Thank you for your words and for your message. Thank you, Irene Khan, the UN envoy for enhancing the freedom of speech. As we keep our promise towards our work and our profession, and as we keep our promise to our martyrs, we will continue our work, our mission, and Al Jazeera will never stop sharing the truth in the most professional way. And as Anas al-Sharif used to say, we continue the coverage. Thank you.
Well, those were some of our colleagues at Al Jazeera Arabic in the studio as well as in the newsroom as they pay tribute to the 5 Al Jazeera journalists murdered in an Israeli attack in Gaza.
Don't miss out. Get a full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.
Wealth will not save Gondor. Uruk do not care for trinkets. Sauron will use gold to buy allies among the kingdoms of men.